This is Hunsbury Hill Auto Transformer Substation, situated on the West Coast Main Line and feeding the auto transformer system. Above we have the mimic diagram of the bus bar and outgoing supplies and incoming supplies, and below we have the control panels. This is a WI Arriva switchgear. This is the rear of the switchgear, showing the bus bar chamber containing the plus and the minus bus bars, one of which goes to the catenary, the other of which goes to the auto feeder. The bus bar contains SF6 gas as an additional insulating medium. Down below we see the outgoing circuit breaker connections and the VT voltage transformers. Here we see the mimic for a single circuit breaker and disconnector and earth switch arrangement. On the right we see the bus bar, and on the left we see the outgoing feed. We see the bus bar disconnector, and above that the earth switch. Zooming in, we see in close-up the disconnector and the earth switch. This is in fact one switch which can be connected from the outgoing feed on the left to either the bus bar lower or the earth switch upper. In the lower it's feeding out via the circuit breaker to the equipment. In the upper it is connecting the equipment to earth. Here is the circuit breaker indication, and to the right the spring charge indicator, which shows whether the closing spring is charged or free. The lower panel contains the controls for operating the circuit breaker and connector, and below the protection relays which operate to clear faults. Here we see the control switches to operate the circuit breaker, disconnector and earth switch for isolation or switching purposes. On the right we see the supervisory local switch, which gives the control of the circuit breaker either to the electric control room or to a local operator. The earth switch control, which opens or closes the earth switch. The disconnector control opens or closes the disconnector, and the circuit breaker control, which opens or closes the circuit breaker. Below this are some MCBs. The right hand ones control the supply to the circuit breaker motor, the disconnector motor and the earth switch motor. In the event of isolation, these are used to isolate the supply to prevent inadvertent operations. In the centre of the picture, the black and red buttons are a mechanical operation for closing and tripping the circuit breaker. Under isolation conditions, they are usually padlocked, so they cannot be operated. We are now going to carry out isolation and earthing of track feeder at Hunsbury Hill, Hotel Uniform Papa Alpha 1. Initially, we see the arrangement in normal feed position. The circuit breaker is closed and the disconnector is closed. Thereby the circuit is from and to bus bar, out through the circuit breaker to the ceiling end and onto the overhead.
Hello, it's Mick Pearson, Rugby Distribution at Hunsbury Hill. Can you please open Hotel Uniform Papa Alpha 1 for me, please? Thank you very much, sir. Perfect. Okay, speak to you later.
We are now going to operate the control selector switch from supervisory to local. This has ensured that the breaker cannot be opened or closed remotely. Next, we open the overhead line switch, which disconnects the cable and switchgear from the contact wire. Next, we operate the circuit disconnector. We are now in the open position with the circuit disconnector and the open position with the circuit breaker. Having isolated the cable, our next action is to test it and then connect it through to earth. We test the cable by means of the cable test device on the lower left. We are next going to test the cable by means of the test lamp, which fits into a socket which is connected to a detector in close proximity to the cable. But first we have to make a test to ensure that the testing device works. We either test the tester by applying it to adjacent live equipment, or in the absence of this we have a mains derived test socket on the wall. We plug the tester in, we see that it illuminates, which confirms that it is working correctly. We now apply the tester and confirm the cable is dead. We are next going to earth the cable via operation of the earth switch on the top right of the picture. This will interlock to the circuit breaker on the lower left of the picture and close it automatically. But before we do this, in order that the spring is discharged on the circuit breaker, we are going to operate the circuit breaker motor control spring charging MCB to the open position, so the spring will remain discharged after we've closed the circuit breaker. We are now going to close the earth switch, which will interlock and close the circuit breaker. Here we see that the circuit breaker is closed, but the closing spring has remained free. Now that we have the cable earthed, we next switch off the disconnector and earth switch MCBs, and we remove the trip and closing fuses from the lower part of the panel. At the rear of the switchgear, we now place the VT isolator into the open and earthed position. We also see the indicator showing that the outgoing cable is now connected to earth. We now see that we have applied padlocks to the control switches and to the push buttons that operate all the equipment used for this isolation. The keys to these padlocks will be placed in the lock-off box, and a unique lock-off box key will be given to the recipient of the permit to work along with the permit to work.